Hi, I'm Jack, and welcome back because I am going to give you all my very first ever spoiler review for a movie that came out in the year it was released, and that is for none other than Spider-Man: No Way Home. And before we get started, don't forget to follow me on social media. My username is down below at the bottom of the screen and in the description below, so don't forget to do that while you're at it. And like I said before, this is a spoiler review. I will not hold back with all the spoilers that have happened in this movie. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, go see the movie and come back here once you are done. And with that said, let's get started. To kick off the spoilers, one of the things I love about how this movie started is that it picks up right from where Far From Home left off. Right when Peter was about to react to what just happened when his identity got revealed, it picks up right from that moment, and I love it. It makes you feel like Far From Home and No Way Home are like a double feature, which came back to back, because I loved how they picked it up from there. But not just because I loved that it picked up from there, but we got to see everybody react to his identity being revealed. MJ, Ned, all the people in New York City, everybody reacts to it, and I just love when you see MJ, she's freaking out. Peter looks down at her, and you see all of the people around her are just looking at her like, are you Spider-Man's girlfriend and all that? And then you see how people are really starting to get in on Spider-Man, and they're really starting to freak out about him because not only is his identity revealed, but he's also framed for committing all the drone attacks in Far From Home. And I love, we see him trying to get away, get out of the city, try to get away, and then even helicopters are onto him. So I love seeing them. They're trying to get out of there, get away from the public because his identity got revealed, and they're freaking out. And it's like, what are we going to do? Your identity's been exposed. And I love that. It really gives you the sense of urgency because now everyone knows who he is. They know Peter Parker is Spider-Man. So I love that they kicked off this movie right from that moment rather than starting with a time jump. And what I also love too is then they get back and Aunt May and Happy, they find out about all this. So then you get to see a few scenes of them basically being investigated, interrogated, and just all of that. And I thought it was cool just to see all of them in this state because of what happened, and that MJ and Ned and Aunt May, they're all accomplices. They were involved. They had a knowing of what happened with Peter's Spider-Man and that they know he's Spider-Man. So I love that the movie was able to give us some of those scenes and actually give us that rather than fast forward like a year or something later after that reveal. And one of the things that got me so happy, and it made the whole theater applaud, was that they brought back Charlie Cox as none other than Matt Murdock. Now, Daredevil is my favorite Marvel TV show, one of the best comic book shows I've ever seen in my entire life. And the fact that we got to see Charlie come back as Matt Murdock for a scene in this movie with Peter, Happy, and May is so awesome to me. I love Charlie as Daredevil. He is perfect casting. And the fact that we got to see him again and get him talking with these characters, I think is just awesome. And not only is it cool, but he still looks like Daredevil. He's still got the red glasses, the hair looks a little different, and he's still dressed like Matt Murdock. And I love that they were able to get him into this movie with all of these other big things and big characters showing up in this movie. I love that they got to fit him in there. And I also love the line and the moment where he says, "You're going to need a really good lawyer." And then he's like, "You better be ready." What? Because why? And then it's like, and then I love when he says, "I'm a really good lawyer," and that he is. I just love we got to see Charlie Cox again as this character. It's so awesome, and I really hope. I cannot wait to see what they're going to do with him in the future, apparently, because there's a rumor that he's going to be in She-Hulk and maybe even in more stuff. So that I cannot wait to see. Another thing I want to bring up, spoiler-wise, is Doctor Strange. So I love Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange, and he surprisingly does a good chunk of stuff here since his own solo movie and Infinity War. And I really like his dynamic with Spidey, because of their little moments they've had in Infinity War and even in this movie. And how what I liked was that they didn't make Doctor Strange a mentor to him. They actually made them like colleagues of sorts. Because one of the things I didn't want them to do with their relationship in this movie is make him like a mentor figure, which I did not think we need, especially after Far From Home. And so I like that they made them like their colleagues. They're having to work together. He comes to him to cast a spell that will have everyone forget that he's Spider-Man. And Peter keeps messing it up so badly to the point where it just went crazy. And I love that how it introduces all of these other characters. Like, that's how we get Doc Ock and Green Goblin and Electro and Sandman and Lizard, is that everybody who knew that Peter Parker is Spider-Man in all of these universes that exist are all coming to this universe. And I love that we got to see Doctor Strange react in a way where he freaks out about it, even though he is the one that cast the spell, but it's also Peter's fault because he was talking. So there's an equal, like, part for who to blame, because Doctor Strange cast the spell in the first place, but Peter was the one that just was being really annoying to him, that it led to all of this happening. So that I liked. And I liked their scene together where Doctor Strange is like, we gotta do something. You gotta find your villains. This is your mess. And especially when we got to see moments where they get all the villains, and then Doctor Strange, he comes in, he's about to send them all back to their universes where they're going to suffer the exact same fate as before, where Green Goblin was going to die from getting impaled by his glider, Doctor Strange was going to drown, and Sandman hasn't necessarily died from what we know of, and how Electro is going to just blow up from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And so that was going to happen, and I love that Peter decided not to go with it because he knew, like, he doesn't want to send all of them back if they were all going to die. And so I like that. It makes him feel like Spider-Man because he wants to help people. He doesn't just help the good guys or the innocent civilians, but he also tries to help the villains. And that's what I loved here. And so I love that little sequence between Spidey and Doctor Strange where they were fighting. He was trying to get away with the cube device, and then they go into the mirror dimension, and Spidey's trying to get away from him and all that. And you have that little encounter, and really cool stuff. I really like that sequence between Spidey and Strange, and I thought Benedict Cumberbatch was really great in this movie. Adding to how they handled the villains, I was really looking forward to seeing them all again, but I was wondering, how are they going to do this, knowing what happened to them before? And it's safe to say that I love how they pulled them off. Doc Ock, they kept him in character, and they did not do anything that ruins his arc from Spider-Man 2. And I love that they were able to get Alfred Molina with de-aging technology to look just as he did in 2004. And I loved his moments with Tom, especially the bridge fight scene, and especially with him and the scenes with all the villains. Like, we finally get to see a scene with him and Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, and I never thought we were ever going to see that happen. But here we are. This movie exists, and we finally got to see it happen, and that, I think, is just awesome to me. And not only that too, but I just love how they were able to keep it consistent, because of how in Spider-Man 2, Doc Ock was all about, he wanted to make mankind better, but he eventually was like starting to realize that this machine he was making could destroy the city, and that the tentacles have took control of him. And he never was thinking that he was doing anything bad until he's starting to realize what he's doing is wrong. He got to stop this. And he destroys the machine with the line of, "I will not die a monster." And thankfully in this movie, that is the case. He does not die a monster. And I liked how they handled his character. And Willem Dafoe is the main villain of this movie as Green Goblin. And this was one I was excited for, because Green Goblin is one of the best comic book villains and movie villains of all time. And Willem Dafoe he nails that character so well. So I was really excited to see him return. And thankfully, he was even more menacing in this movie, in my opinion, because I love that he destroys the Green Goblin helmet so that in fight sequences, whenever it's Willem in a fight, you see his face, his facial expressions, because there is a moment where Tom, he pounds on Green Goblin so much in the hallway of the condo that he and Aunt May are staying in, and just seeing Tom just beat Green Goblin hard and throw punches, and you just see Willem Dafoe's face and how evil he looks and how his laughing is just done so well, and Willem Dafoe just once again nails it. He looks so good in this role once again. And I just love his scenes that he has with Tom and Alfred Molina. I just love seeing Willem Dafoe again. And I think it was so awesome that they brought him back, because he was phenomenal in this movie and he was an amazing villain. And Willem Dafoe proves once again that he is the best that he is the best casting for this character. And I just loved everything they've done with him. He was menacing, he was terrifying, he was clever, and even with Willem's voice, he does such a good job at giving us the idea of, is he Norman Osborn right now, or is he Green Goblin? And the transition between the two of them, especially in a certain scene where Spider-Man senses are tingling, and I love that sequence, by the way, where he feels like something's wrong. He goes into the center and everyone's around him, from Aunt May to Doc Ock to Green Goblin, the Sandman, Electro. And then he closes his eyes and opens it, and then boom, Webb's Green Goblin and realizes something's up. And I love that scene and how he transitions from Norman to Green Goblin. And Willem Dafoe is just such a fantastic actor, and I loved him in this movie. He once again delivers a great and memorable performance as his character, and even the final fight between the two of them is extraordinary. Jamie Foxx as Electro is also something I was looking forward to seeing because, for those of you who know, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is my least favorite Spider-Man movie for a number of reasons, and I felt like they underutilized Electro. I didn't like the way they depicted him, and it was nothing on Jamie Foxx's part, but I thought they easily redeemed his Electro with this movie. He's yellow, and I love his new look. It looks far better than him being in blue. And I just love how they were able to fit him in the story. And he had some cool moments with Tom and with Sandman and all that. And they redeemed that character for me. Thomas Hayden Church's Sandman is easily one of the best parts about Spider-Man 3. And I thought it was cool that they brought him back for this movie, even though he doesn't do as much as Green Goblin or Doc Ock or Electro. And they did reuse a footage of him in human form from that movie. But I like that we got to see him again. They kept his character consistent, where he wasn't a villain. He just wanted to be there for his daughter who's dying. And I liked how he gets put into all of this, and how when you first see him, he's protecting Peter from Electro. And then he zaps Electro, and then Sandman gets all like just angry and all that for what that would have meant. But I really liked how they handled him in this movie, and that they did not make him a just full-on villain, which would have been against his character arc in 3. But thankfully, they honored his character from before, and then he was able, and Thomas he did such a great job in this movie for what he was able to do. Rhys Ifans as Lizard is the other villain in this movie, and The Amazing Spider-Man 1 is an underrated movie, but I felt like Lizard is one of the weakest villains in the Spider-Man movies because I love the character Lizard as a villain. I didn't like the way they executed him in that movie, and I thought it was really cool that they brought it back. His new Lizard design, I really like. He looks bigger, and he looks a little more terrifying than in Amazing Spider-Man 1, and he looked a little more like a lizard. And I liked his moments that he gets to talk as the Lizard, and his conversation with the villains in the basement of the Sanctum Sanctorum and all, even in the climax and all that. So I thought it was cool to see Lizard come back. Because again, I do like Lizard and Sandman in this movie, even though they don't do as much as the other 3 villains I've mentioned. But thankfully, all of these villains from these other movies are handled very well here. They are not ruined. They keep their arcs consistent, and it honors what came before in both the Raimi trilogy and in the Amazing Spider-Man duology. One of the most emotional parts in this entire movie was the death of Aunt May. Marisa Tomei's version of Aunt May from a writing standpoint is my least favorite Aunt May out of the 3 live-action Aunt Mays. And I wasn't big on what they did with her in Far From Home as a character, but it's safe to say that this is easily MCU Aunt May at her best. I love what they did with her in this movie. She acts more like Aunt May from a writing perspective, and Marisa Tomei does such a great job. In this movie, I really enjoyed her moments with Tom, and having her be okay with helping all of these villains in the condo, with Tom trying to cure them. And when they killed her off, as she tries to stop, she just stands there as Green Goblin took down Spidey, and she dies because of a goblin bomb. That was really emotional. Tom Holland really acted phenomenal in that scene. It's just such a tearjerker just watching Peter Parker lose Aunt May, and just how they did it so well, and it really sets up the stakes and the consequences and Tom's character going into the third act. And it's really emotional to see them just kill off Aunt May, who is someone that Spider-Man loves and cares about, and Green Goblin just took her away from him. And just seeing Tom, just his Spidey just break down. He's sad. He's just like, could not imagine what happened and that this is his fault. I love it. It's pure Spider-Man moment. You see him feel guilty for what's happened, and you see him react to the fact that his Aunt May has passed. And it was such a great and really tragic scene that I thought they pulled off really well. Now let's talk about the biggest parts of this entire movie. One of the bigger surprises, and that is the return of none other than Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. When Andrew Garfield shows up as Ned and MJ want to see Peter, and they open a portal and they realize, Peter, come on in. And you see it's Andrew. Myself and the entire audience, both times I saw this movie, were freaking out. Just seeing Andrew Garfield come back as this character that he really showed a lot of passion for is amazing. And I love seeing Andrew just come back as his character, despite all of the times he said he was lying. I just thought Andrew is just a fantastic actor in general. I loved him in The Social Network and even in Tick, Tick, Boom. So I thought it was amazing that we got to see him come back as Spider-Man in No Way Home, because this character meant so much to him, and I felt bad for his run. He only had 2 movies and just how they've handled his movies, and I thought he deserved a lot better. And I was so happy to see Andrew come back, and he truly put his heart and soul into this role once again. I just could tell how happy and excited he was to play this character. And I loved those moments between him, MJ, and Ned, because it's like, he's not their Peter. And they're just reacting to that. And it's like, there's some really funny moments that happen between them, especially with the cobweb and the catch the bread. And just he's able to stick to the ceiling. I thought that is really cool stuff. And then the audience once again roared in applause when Tobey Maguire shows up. I actually think it was cool that he doesn't show up in his Spider-Man suit, but rather just as normal Peter Parker clothes. I thought that was cool. And from his entrance alone, it felt pure Raimi characterization, because I love how he comes in, he's like, he's Peter Parker, and that it's Tobey Maguire, and then he sees Ned's mom, and he's just like, hi. Just how he did hi, especially in Spider-Man 1 when he does that with MJ, just how he's characterized, it felt like pure Tobey Maguire Spider-Man from the Raimi trilogy. The characterization for him, even alongside Andrew Garfield, I think is really great. They were able to keep them in line with their movies. And I just love seeing Tobey and Andrew again, because I never thought we were ever going to see them suit up as the character again. And we did in No Way Home, and their entrance I loved. I loved seeing them both come back the way they did, and it was just so cool. And then there was a fun moment where they both look at each other. It's like, you're me, and then they do a flip, and then boom, Tobey just shoots an organic web to Andrew's web shooters. I thought that was a really funny moment. And then we got to have the scene where Tom is on the roof of Midtown High, and MJ and Ned come over to comfort him because of what happened to Aunt May. And they say that there are people who want to see you. And it's Tobey and Andrew. And when they came down, it was so cool. The very first scene to have all 3 live action Spider-Men in the movies. That was just amazing, amazing stuff. And I thought it was so cool. And how it's so heartfelt and emotional that in that scene, how Tom just lost Aunt May and he's reeling from it. He's like, you all need to go. I'm going to kill a Green Goblin because he killed my aunt. And I love when Tobey, he comes in and he's like, I lost my Uncle Ben. I thought I killed my killer and something like that. He thought it was going to make it better, but how he said he ended up actually being worse off for it. And with Andrew, which was super emotional, considering that Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone had such great chemistry, he brings up how devastated he was when he lost Gwen, because of how he mentioned that when he lost her, he stopped pulling his punches, which meant that he went down a really dark path, and he did things he probably regrets because of that. And you see that Spider-Man, he really felt lost because of what happened to Gwen. And I think it was so emotional, and Andrew conveys that so well. And even Tobey, with what he said about Uncle Ben, I thought it was so emotional to seeing all three of these Spider-Men just come together reeling from their losses, and how they must deal with it, and that Tom has to he has to live with that, and he has to move on. He has to help. We gotta stop Green Goblin and these villains. And I thought that was such an emotional scene that was done really well, and it gives Tom just more like an ability to do in his Spider-Man character what he must do. And then you have the scene where they're in the lab, they're making gear for how they could take down the villains, and there's some fun moments we had between each of the Spider-Men, especially with Tobey telling Andrew about MJ from the Raimi trilogy and how they had a complicated relationship after 3, but that they were finally able to make the relationship work. And how Ned asked Tobey, hey, you've had a best friend? And how Tobey said, I did, and that he died in his arms after he tried to kill him, which, even though in 3, Harry did try to kill him, but he did show up to save Spidey, who was about to get killed by Venom and Sandman in Spider-Man 3, and died in his arms trying to save him from getting killed by Venom, but I wasn't too bothered by that. And how Andrew also had Harry Osborn, his universe, and he was also the one responsible for causing the death of Gwen Stacy. So I thought that led to some interesting moments with Ned in this movie. And seeing Tom and MJ just talk about all this. And even we finally got a moment, 2 moments to be exact, where Ned calls out for Peter, and all 3 of them react. They're like, oh, yes. And he's like trying to be like, no, I'm talking to Peter. And it's like, we're all named Peter. And the other thing being, Tobey has organic webs. They made the joke about the organic webs, which I thought is hilarious, because I was hoping that they would do that in this movie, because Tobey has organic webs, but Andrew and Tom, they need web shooters to have that. And I love that joke where Tom's like, you can shoot organic webs, and he's like, you can't do that. And I just thought that is such a funny scene, especially with how they acted as their own characters. I thought that was so great. The next thing I want to bring up is the climax, which is without a doubt a Spider-Man fan's dream. Seeing all 3 Spider-Men team up against the other 5 villains in this movie. And I thought that is just awesome. Pure fan service stuff. But the fan service worked, because this story would not have worked without any of these characters. If Tobey wasn't going to come back, the whole thing wouldn't work. If Willem Dafoe wasn't going to come back, then none of this would have worked. I love how it shows you that this movie needed all of these characters in order for the whole story to work as the way it is. All of these moments, like every one of these characters has a purpose for being there. Like Willem Dafoe stated in an interview that I have a case to state, and I love that. And he was right, because he really does have a reason for being there. He's not there just for the sake of fan service. You remember me from Spider-Man 1? No, there's an actual reason for these characters to be there in this movie at the moments when they did. And that's what I love. And the climax also proves that. And then there's some more cool moments with Tom, Tobey, and Andrew in this movie, where we got to see Tobey in the suit, the full suit again, which looked just like it did in the Raimi trilogy. And they had some fun moments, like Tobey's back feels broken, then Andrew fixes it for him, which I thought was a funny moment. And they even talk about how Tobey and his organic webs, and how Tom is like, hey, does it come out of just your hands, or does it come out everywhere else? And I died laughing. That is such a funny scene. And with Andrew just reacting to that, it's like, hey, do you have like a web block? And he's like, he did once, and that was in Spider-Man 2. But I thought that was such a funny moment between them. And they got to talk about the fact that Tobey fought Venom, who's an alien. And then Tom had to bring up that I fought Thanos. I fought an alien in another planet. And they're like, oh, you went to another planet and fought an alien. And I just love the moment when they were kind of like freaking out. It's like, oh, Tom went to another planet to fight an alien. And love the moment where Andrew thinks his Spider-Man, he's like, I'm lame compared to you two. And I love when Tobey comes in, he's like, can we go back to your lame part? No, that's not true. You're not lame. You're amazing. And he truly is. And I love that because his movies are titled The Amazing Spider-Man. So I thought that is a nice moment they did there. I just love seeing these three together so much. It just felt like a dream for me. And we finally got to see it happen. And everyone was in character, which makes it even better. And we got to see them web swing together. We got to see them coordinate, team up with one another against these characters. And we got to see them just all in their suits. We got to see them all in one shot as they land from their web swing. We got to see, it's like Tobey lands first, then Andrew lands first, and then Tom, which I like because that refers to the fact of how Tobey's the first live-action theatrical Spider-Man, then it was Andrew, and then it was Tom Holland. So I love that they landed in that order in that scene. And we got to see Andrew come face to face with Lizard again, which I thought was nice considering that Lizard was the very first villain he fought in The Amazing Spider-Man. And he got to make up with Jamie Foxx as Electro. There are a few scenes that Andrew and Electro had that I thought were really, really cool stuff. And I love that they got the fight where Andrew comes up and just like in character with the quips, he's like, hey, Max, you miss me? And I love that. And Electro's like, oh, look who it is. It's my old friend Spider-Man. And I love that. I love their scenes together, especially seeing them face off one another. And we got to see Tobey face the Lizard in Andrew's universe. And we got to see him even come face to face with Sandman again. And that is such a great scene when they cure Sandman with the device that Tom handed to him because it looked like Tobey was going to be suffocated from Sandman. And then they have a scene where Sandman reverting back to human form and Tobey's like, it's okay, we're going to get you home. I love it because I love the scene between Tobey and Sandman in Spider-Man 3 at the end where they both, the whole I forgive you moment. I love that. And the scene, just in a way, it elevates that in No Way Home for me. And Andrew, not just that too, we got to see him face off with these villains. I thought that was really awesome stuff. We got to see him make up with Electro. Just who he was. He's like, I don't want to go back to my universe. I'm a nobody. And then I love when Andrew comes in. He's like, you're not a nobody. You're a somebody. And just, I love that. I love seeing Andrew, that scene with Andrew and Electro. They make up with one another after what happened in this movie and in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Such a nice moment. And especially with the track that played in the background where they played the James Horner theme from Amazing Spider-Man 1. And then the scene after, we get to see a reunion between Tobey Maguire and Alfred Molina's Doc Ock. And they play the Raimi theme. And I thought this is just such a beautiful scene to sing Tobey and Doc Ock reunites. I never thought this was going to happen, and it is. That's the amazing thing with this movie, especially with the climax. It's like, I never thought we would ever see this happen in a Spider-Man movie, and it did. We got these moments that happen in real life, and they were all done so well. They didn't feel like they're thrown in there for the sake of pleasing fans. Like, there was an actual story purpose for this to happen. Like, that's how you do fan service right. This movie shows you how to do it right without making it feel unnecessary. And like, I love how Tobey sees Doc Ock and they see Tobey's like, how are you doing? And then Tobey's like, I'm trying to do better. Just like what he said in Spider-Man 2. I love that. How he's like, you've grown and all that stuff. And I love it. Such a heartfelt reunion scene. And they kept Doc Ock in character, like I said already, because when Tobey and Andrew and Tom, like, they're being attacked by Electro, and Doc Ock comes in, he's like, I'm going to finish them off for you. Doc Ock, in a surprise attack, cures Electro, saves the Spider-Man, and I thought that is a really cool scene, because again, Doc Ock, by the end of 2, redeems himself. And I liked how in this movie, when they cured Doc Ock in the condo scene, that it keeps in line with him before, and I love that so much. And then there was one villain who hadn't showed up yet, and that is none other than Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, the climax. And I thought, here we go. We're going to get some real stuff happening here. And that leads to the moment where MJ is falling to her, she's falling to her possible death, and Tom tries to save her. And then Green Goblin, boop, comes in, stops him from saving her. And then I love what I was hoping they would do when I saw the second trailer was that Andrew was going to come in and save her. And in fact, they did. Andrew came in, saved her, and I loved it. The whole theater, including myself, just clapped and cheered when that happened, because it feels like a spiritual redemption. They finally made Andrew come full circle. He stopped Tom from having to go through what he did, and he stopped MJ from dying the same way Gwen did, because he didn't want what happened to Gwen to happen to anyone else ever again. And I thought it was such a beautiful moment when Andrew, he saves MJ, and you see him tearing up knowing he did it. He redeemed himself, and he saved Tom from going through what he did, and that he got to save MJ from dying the same way Gwen did. And I thought it's such a beautiful moment, and I love that they did that. I thought it was a great idea that they had Andrew save her rather than Tom Spider-Man, because it would make sense for Andrew's character to be the one to save MJ, and that I do love. And then with Doctor Strange, he comes out the Mirrorverse, because apparently Ned can open portals with the sling ring now, and I thought that's a pretty nice little moment there, what they were able to do with Ned there. And I loved how Doctor Strange shows up. He's like, I've been trapped in the Grand Canyon for 12 hours, and then all three Spider-Men show up, and Doctor Strange reacts like, huh? And I just thought that was nice. They got him back. And then Green Goblin comes in, causes mayhem, and then Tom blows up his glider. And then on the shield that was supposed to be put onto the Statue of Liberty, I love when it's a final fight. You got Tom, and then you got Green Goblin, and they're about to fight, and Tom looks like he's battle damaged. His face looks bruised. He looked like he's going to kill Green Goblin on the spot. And they fought, and it was brutal. It was just such a ruthless fight. But Green Goblin was not holding back, and he looked like he was going to kill Peter. And I loved how Tom, he's going all out with him, because there hasn't really been a villain in this movie besides maybe Thanos in Infinity War and Endgame, where Tom was going all out on the villain. He was just punching him, dodged his move, and then grab him, body slam him. He even tried to do an upper kick and on him or something like that. And that caused a dent in the shield. And I knew Tom was like, he was going to kill him. He was going to beat up Green Goblin until he was able to kill him. And I love that, just seeing how strong Tom is and how he's losing himself. He's going down the dark path, doing what he's doing to Green Goblin. And it was such a brutal fight, especially with Willem Dafoe's facial expressions, which is another thing to why I'm happy they got rid of the helmet, because we were able to see Willem's face as these scenes happen, and how Willem's like, oh boy, he's just like, I'm going to enjoy this or something like that. And Tom beats him up so brutally, like he was about to kill him, and Andrew and Tobey are both watching this happen. And then he grabs the glider. He was about to kill Green Goblin the same way he died in the Raimi trilogy, and I love that right when he's about to do it, Tobey comes in and saves Norman. He stops Tom from doing it, and Tom, he's struggling. He's like, I want to kill him badly, and they didn't have to say a line of dialogue. It was just Tobey's eyes, their facial expressions, and just their eyes. It says everything. And I love how Tobey was able to stop Tom from making that mistake and from having Norman die the same way he did in Spider-Man 1. And so I love that he stops, he drops the glider, and then Green Goblin stabs Tobey, which shocked me, because I was like, no, don't kill off Tobey's Spider-Man. Don't kill him off. It's just like, please don't do this. And he does, and Andrew, he grabs the device to cure Green Goblin. He throws it at Tom, and Tom perfectly catches it, and then boom, cured. And I love that. It was just such a cool moment right there. And I love when they cured Norman, and he looks at Tobey and all of that, how it's like, that's his Spider-Man. I would have liked some dialogue between Tobey and Norman, because we didn't really get that in this movie as much like we got a scene with him and Sam and him and Doc Ock. But I'm not too bothered by it, because that moment where, Willem, his Norman Osborn is cured, and then he looks at Tobey as Tobey just got stabbed. He's just lying down, and they look at each other. I kind of feel like just that look and face kind of just says it all for me, even though I would have liked a scene or a little like exchange of lines between them. But I didn't mind it, didn't bother me, but I kind of felt like we could have had something between them, but I thought that was nice enough for what we were able to get between those two. And then they cured him, and then the multiverse starts to just break. Everyone is about to like come to this universe, and Doctor Strange is like, I can't stop it. And then Peter, in a scene, decides to be like, you know what? Erase me from my memory. Just pretend that they don't know who I am. And Doctor Strange is like, I can't do this. I can't, because then the people who know and love you, it'll be like you never exist. And it's such a sad scene. You see Peter, he's just like thinking about it, and he's just like, do it. For the sake of the universe, he had to. And for the sake of the multiverse, he had to. And it was such an emotional scene because of knowing what that's going to mean, that nobody's going to remember he's Spider-Man. Everybody he's ever encountered over the course of his movies, from when he was in the MCU, from Civil War to now, they're going to not know who he is. And it's such an emotional scene, and I love that. Before that could happen, we get to see Tom and Andrew and Tobey. They get one more scene together where Andrew lifts Tobey up, and how Tobey's like, oh, I got stabbed. It's not the first time. And then Tom comes in. He's like, y'all are going to go back to your universe now. And he's about to go. He's like, I'm going to go find MJ. And they hug each other. Just, yes, the fan service right here. It's so good. And I love, we got to see them finally just hug each other before he goes. And I thought that's such a beautiful moment to really cap off their time together in this movie, because Tobey, Andrew, and Tom are just so good in this movie together. They have such a great chemistry and dynamic with one another. And that was such a beautiful moment where Tom is like, I'm about to go. He just hugs all three of them before he goes, and before both of them go back to their universes. And then Doc Ock and Electro and Green Goblin and Sandman and Lizard, they all go back to their universes. But for those of you who want to make sure, when they leave, they don't go back to that exact same movie, their timeline, where Green Goblin's not going to go back and get impaled again. Because they're cured, each of those characters are going into, those who died especially, they're going to go into a branch reality to where they're cured, which means they don't die like we saw in the movies that came out. Tobey and Andrew will go back to their timeline from those movies. They get to go back exactly where they were. But the villains, they all go back into a branch reality to where they don't get killed by Spider-Man. So Green Goblin goes back to a reality where he doesn't die. Same with Doc Ock. Same with Electro. Same with these characters. And Loki confirms this, because everything that plays out in a movie does not get undone or wiped from, or just altered. None of that happens. So I just have to clarify that. So the villains, because they're cured now, they go to a branch reality similar to the ones that they came from, but they don't die. So things play out differently, but Tobey and Andrew will go back to the exact reality that they came from. And then back to the whole Tom thing. So, and then Tom, MJ, and Ned, they have one more scene together where he tells them, I'm going to make everyone forget that I'm Spider-Man, and that will include you too. And how they both are like, no, we can't do this. We don't want to forget about you. And how this movie heavily focused on the relationship between Peter and MJ, and how they love each other so much, especially with the first half of this movie, with the identity being revealed and all of that. And I love how in this moment, they say things like, please, just when all this goes, please tell us that you're Spider-Man, or she'll find out again. And then even with Ned, and it's such a sad scene because Peter and MJ kiss one more time, and they have one last scene, and then Peter goes off, and Doctor Strange just commences the spell, and now no one knows he's Spider-Man. It's back to square one. And I thought that is actually a nice moment. I like that they decided to end this movie in a way to where no one knows he's Spider-Man, so he can start from square one all over again when they start his next trilogy, rather than have this movie just end where he keeps the public identity. And then it cuts to a flash forward to where Peter's going to go back to the coffee shop or place that MJ works at. And he looks like he's about to tell her he's Spider-Man and who he is, but even to Ned, but he doesn't go with it. And I think that is a pure Spider-Man move because he doesn't want to risk his identity being revealed, and that them knowing he was Spider-Man put them in danger, and that he didn't want them to be in danger of anything that is gonna have to happen to him going forward. And I love that. It felt like pure Peter Parker to me. Aunt May has died, and he goes to her grave, just still reeling from the fact that she's gone. And then Happy shows up, who at some point in the movie gets caught, arrested by the police or the FBI because of what happened in the condo apartment with Green Goblin and all that. So they had a scene together about how it's like, who did you know her, and how it's like no one knows he's Spider-Man, so he doesn't have Happy to rely on and anybody. He's all on his own. It's such a sad scene, and it's just heartbreaking to see this Peter just back to square one. No one knows who he is. He doesn't have anyone to rely on anymore. And thankfully, no more Stark Tech. They don't need, he doesn't need any, he doesn't have access to it anymore, but he doesn't need to, in my opinion. And I thought that was such a sad scene between them. And just the fact that after that, he goes to the apartment and he has his stuff. And now it's like pure Peter. He looks like he's going to start college or something, so that we have the chance for this next trilogy to finally be a more comic faithful Spider-Man trilogy with Tom. And I love how he looks at the apartment. It looks like it's all of himself. It's kind of crummy looking and all that, but he'll make it work. And then he puts his stuff in the room, and then he just takes that Emperor Palpatine, he places it, and even the photos of MJ and such. And that was sad because now they don't know who he is. And even that Emperor Palpatine Lego figure, that says a lot, especially from Homecoming with their friendship and all, and how that's no longer a thing. It's gone now. And then it cuts to Spidey on his phone looking at how apparently there's something criminal related happening, and then you see that he's making a new suit. And then it all ends with a final swing where Spider-Man has a completely new suit, back in the red blue. It looks a lot more comic accurate, and I love what we saw of it, even though we don't get a good official HD look of it. But the new suit, from what I saw, I love it. I love how it's in the snow. You see him going on a rooftop and just jumping off rooftops and all that. And they played the MCU Spidey theme, but it feels a lot more heroic, a lot more grand, and a lot more bigger. And I love it. They perfected his MCU Spidey theme in No Way Home. And I love how in the end you see it's snowing, a new suit, he jumps off a building, you see Rockefeller Center with the Christmas tree and the ice skating rink, and he just web swings, and then the eyes come to the screen and then cuts to black, and then that's the movie. And then we got two end credit scenes. The first one with Venom from Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage, where he's in Mexico, he's still in the bar. He's trying to basically just talk to this bartender about the MCU, how about Thanos and about Iron Man, that there are other heroes, and how it was a funny little moment, especially between them, about it's like, what are they going to do? They're in an alternate universe, and how they're like, we're going to find Spider-Man, and then they get pulled back, they get sent back to possibly their own reality, but then a piece of the Venom symbiote is left on the table, which basically sets up Venom's appearance in the MCU, which means maybe in the next trilogy, Peter is going to get infected by it in the next trilogy, which I'm looking forward to seeing how they're going to have that play out. And the second end credit scene is less of an end credit scene and more of a teaser, because they actually play a teaser trailer for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, directed by Sam Raimi, coming out next May. And that is the next MCU movie that continues the multiverse stuff. And it looks awesome. Cannot wait to see what they do with that. And that's No Way Home. Those are spoilers I've discussed. I absolutely love this movie. I love how they were able to handle all of these different characters. And they were able to honor the Raimi trilogy. Tobey's arc stays intact. Andrew's character stays intact. The villains, all of them, from Doc Ock to Green Goblin to Electro, Sandman, Lizard, they all stay intact. It does a great job at telling a story about Tom's Spider-Man, and it does an amazing job at having the multiverse stuff be a part of his identity reveal. Because this movie could have been messy, but it wasn't. like Jon Watts and the writers did such a great job at handling this movie that they really did the best they could with all of this. And they were able to honor what came before with Tobey and Andrew so that what happened in their movies, it stays intact and it feels even elevated thanks to what No Way Home was able to do with them. And so it's just a pure Spider-Man fan dream. I never thought we would ever see a movie where Tobey, Andrew, and Tom are gonna show up as Spider-Man all together with Willem Dafoe, Alfred Molina, Jamie Foxx, Thomas Hayden Church, and Rhys Ifans, all of them coming back. I never thought that was ever gonna be a thing. And here we are. This movie gives us that, and I'm so happy it did, because it does an amazing job at doing that. It handled it to absolute perfection. There may be some nitpicks here and there. Maybe some things could have been better with how Tobey and Andrew entered, but I had absolutely no problem with how they did that. And especially with the editing of sorts because of COVID, I had no problem with it. They delivered the best movie that they could, and I loved this movie so much. It's probably my favorite Spider-Man movie, to be honest with you, just for what this was able to do. I'm so excited for what they have in store with Tom Holland in the next Spider-Man trilogy and even in the MCU. They finally got him to start from square one. They finally got him to have no Stark technology, no none of that. It's just him, all by himself. And I'm so excited to see what they're going to do with him going forward in the MCU. And now hearing that they're probably going to do even more with Tobey and Andrew, so excited to see what they're going to do with that, because I love this movie. I love how it handled the characters, and I am beyond excited to see what the MCU and even Marvel has in store for all these characters, and I absolutely cannot wait for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And with that said, this is probably my favorite movie of this year for a lot of these reasons and things they were able to pull off. So with that said, Spider-Man No Way Home still gets that A+, and I highly recommend you all see this on the big screen. Absolutely worth your time. And it crossed $1 billion. Biggest pandemic movie ever, highest grossing movie since The Rise of Skywalker came out, and I am so happy about it. It absolutely deserved all it was able to do. It's just such a great movie that I absolutely loved, and I can't wait to watch it many more times since. Anyway, those are my spoiler thoughts on Spider-Man No Way Home. What did you think about this movie? Let me know down below in the comment section. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And thank you guys so much for watching. And don't forget to hit that like button and the subscribe button. And stay tuned for more.